Hello, everyone. My name is Toni Okamoto, and I'm the founder of the website Plant-Based on a Budget. I'd like to start by thanking our organizers, Mary and Glenn, for organizing this wonderful VegFest. It's a great turnout, and it's a privilege to be here. I'd also like to give a shout out to my parents who are in the house today. There they are right there. This is their first VegFest, and it's also the first time ever hearing me speak. My family is the reason I started Plant-Based on a Budget. Let me tell you the story. I grew up in a primarily Mexican community, and my grandparents grew most of our food. And the food that we didn't grow, we purchased from places like Denio's Farmers Market or the flea market over on Folsom Boulevard, and whatever ingredients we still needed, we just went over to the local corner store. I think it's fair to say that my family doesn't enjoy spending a lot of money on food. I became vegan 9 years ago, and I remember my family was really concerned about how I was going to be spending my money on my newfound lifestyle. They thought I was going to be spending it shopping at Whole Foods, at juice bars, and using whatever money I had left over to do things like align my chakra. I quickly realized that this was an idea that many people in my social circles and in my community have. As I mentioned, I'm from a Mexican-American community, and many of the people who live there are first and second generation, and they're still establishing themselves in this country and don't have a lot of money to spend on food. And yet, diet-related issues are a plague that are claiming many lives. We are the people who particularly need to benefit from a plant-based diet. In fact, me and my own family were suffering the negative effects of unhealthy eating. I started my plant-based journey as a high school student on the track team. There was a Taco Bell located directly across the street from my high school, and every day at lunch I would go buy 2 beef tacos and a bean and cheese burrito. And then after school, I'd go run as fast as my body could handle and get sick to my stomach every single time. My concerned coach suggested perhaps not eating Taco Bell every day before practice, and he said maybe fast food is not good for optimal health and nutrition. He also suggested cutting out red meat from my diet. And so for the next 2 years, I eliminated red meat and really began to thrive as a runner. Like many people living on the SAD, which is the standard American diet, I was totally content with the minimal changes I had made to improve my health. I grew up in a family culturally rooted in Mexican food with parents who already thought I was a radical hippie for just stopping my beef consumption. And the last thing I'd ever thought I would do was become a vegetarian. But I did. When I graduated high school and moved out of my family's house, I left behind the meat. And I mostly did it because it was expensive. How many of you have heard of the rapper Tupac Shakur? Woo woo. I've been a fan for Tupac for as long as I can remember. His words have been so comforting and inspirational and healing to me, and they've provided me with comfort and guidance and are ultimately the reason that I'm here with you today. It's time for us as a people to start making some changes. Let's change the way we eat, let's change the way we live, and let's change the way we treat each other. You see, the old way wasn't working, so it's on us to do what we got to do to survive. Whew. That's from a song Changes. I'm not sure if that quote does anything for you, but I've heard it a million times, and it still leaves me feeling incredibly inspired. In 2012, when Plant-Based on a Budget was just an idea in my head, those lyrics inspired me to be the change that I wanted to see in the world. For many people, Gandhi does that, but from where I live, from where I've grown up, people don't know who Gandhi is, but people do know who Tupac is. This is my family on a day where many of them couldn't show up for the picture. At the time I started plant-based on a budget, I was feeling really frustrated with my family's health. My uncle had just had a heart attack at the age of 40, which resulted in a bypass surgery. My other uncle found out that he had type 2 diabetes, and others were suffering from things like high blood pressure and high cholesterol. I had already lost my grandfather to complications of a triple bypass surgery, and I watched my aunt suffer from type 2 diabetes, having her toe amputated, then her foot amputated, and then it claimed her life. Watching your family suffer is really, really difficult. In a state of desperateness, I reflected upon Tupac's quote, "We need to change the way we eat, we need to change the way we live, and it's our responsibility to make it happen." I began to compile my family's recipes on what I thought would be a private food blog. I wrote healthier vegan versions of the dishes I grew up with. And I remember telling my cousin, I started a vegan food blog. And she was like, "Girl, I can't afford your fancy vegan food." And this blew my mind because I was in college and I worked part-time as a tutor in the communication lab and also part-time as a nanny, and I definitely could not afford fancy vegan food. And that is when Plant-Based on a Budget was officially born. I was far from a foodie. I loved eating. And I learned to cook in college by checking out books from the library and photocopying all of my favorite recipes. But I more so wanted to challenge the misconception that being vegan somehow meant you ate fancier food or that only elitists could be vegan. I also wanted to help the most culinary challenged people know that cooking didn't have to be complex. You could continue eating foods that were familiar and convenient. And in fact, cooking plant-based food can be fun. I wanted to let people know that vegans didn't only eat lettuce or tofu, and vegans definitely don't eat grass, but instead we eat burgers and tacos and lasagna, and pretty much anything you can eat, I can eat vegan. On the day I launched Plant-Based on a Budget, I posted it on my personal Facebook page, and it totally was a premature move. I was really excited. I only had 3 recipes on my blog, and it was not fully developed. My web guy was like, "What are you doing? It doesn't look good." But a friend of mine who saw it on Facebook worked for an organization called Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and they posted it on their Facebook. So on the first day I launched, I had 500 followers. It was then that I realized how great and how valuable a resource this was for the vegan community. It was popular right away, which led to instant feedback. I started getting all kinds of questions accompanied by really tough personal stories. There were many people who wanted to eat healthier but just didn't know where to begin. People who worked a lot, 50, 60, 70 hours. People who had very limited income. Mothers who were caring for their disabled husbands and their children and living exclusively off of disability. And it brought me back to Tupac. I felt compassion for people who were struggling to eat healthy and did not know where to begin. So I put that compassion I felt into action and started creating free resources. I'd been really comfortable telling people that it's so easy to be vegan. Anybody can be vegan. It's so cheap. You can do it. But when it came down to it, I didn't have any resources to offer. There's an initiative called the SNAP Challenge, which I remembered hearing about but didn't know too much. So I looked into it to see if there were any resources that I felt comfortable promoting. But I was totally disheartened when I further investigated. The goal of the challenge is to bring attention to how little food money people get on SNAP benefits, which is food stamps. But in doing so, I felt like they were being completely insensitive to people who permanently live on little food money. They were posting photos of themselves at discount grocery stores with cheap ingredients, and it just made me feel really uncomfortable. So I decided to start the Plant-Based on a Budget challenge, where I framed the question, how much money can we save eating healthy plant-based foods and making them ourselves? I asked my audience if I created 4 one-week meal plans that showed how you can eat for $25 per week, which is $1.19 per meal, how many people would take it? And nearly 3,000 people signed up. People often say that low-income families eat fast food because it's so much cheaper. But let's do the math. I can eat 3 things off the dollar menu. That's $3. If I did that and ate fast food for every meal, $25 would only feed me less than 3 days. This is what $25 looks on one of my meal plans shopping at Winco. What do I mean by healthier? I'll share a story. I was talking to someone and I said, "What do you like to cook?" And they were like, "I don't remember the last time I used my stove." And I was like, "Well, what do you eat then?" And they said, "Well, after work, I go get some fast food and I have food in a can and I microwave it and I throw some frozen foods in the oven." And that's the demographic I work with. I work with people by trying to encourage them to replace garbage processed foods with produce at a pace that sets them up for success. So you probably want to know how to save money. Through meal planning and working with families with different needs, and also living on a very small food budget myself, I have accumulated many money-saving tips that I'd like to share with you. First, I recommend meal planning. It's the most important. You can use one of mine or create one that works well for your own family, but shop with a purpose and only buy what you'll use. Having a grocery list will keep you focused and make sure that you're not buying things you don't need. And also, cooking in batch meals will ensure that you're not tempted to go to fast food restaurants throughout the week when you're feeling really busy and overwhelmed. Prep on your day off. Cut your veggies, boil your pasta, cook your rice and beans, and have those as staples throughout the week so you can just throw them together when you're feeling busy and overwhelmed. And highly recommend using a slow cooker. You can get a slow cooker from Goodwill, any Goodwill or thrift store, for $4. I got mine for $4. And you can cook your meals while you're asleep or at work. I'm just finishing up a manuscript for a cookbook right now that's a slow cooker cookbook, and it's been pretty stressful. But hopefully the stress that I'm feeling developing these recipes will help many of you guys not deal with that stress. But the idea of the cookbook is for really busy working people who don't have time to spend in the kitchen, and all of the active prep work is 15 minutes or under, and most of the time cooked is 8 hours, so it should be 15 minutes before you go to work, and when you get home you have a delicious meal. And what's good about slow cookers is that you can also cook in batches and freeze your food and just take it out of the freezer when you're ready throughout the week. And they last in the freezer for up to 6 months, many of them. This is my favorite kind of recipe. This is a 4-bean crock pot chili, and I made the beans, which were like $1 a pound. I made the beans while I was asleep, then I woke up and added the veggies and spices, went to work, and when I came home, I had a delicious meal. And that's my favorite kind of meal. For money-saving tips, I think we're so privileged to be living in California where the produce is abundant and so fresh and delicious. Here in Sacramento, we have the farmers market, and during the summer, we have a farmers market almost every day. I recommend going to the farmers market right before they close, and often you can negotiate prices, and many times they've discounted the prices themselves, so you don't have to do much negotiating. But you can freeze the produce for smoothies or stir fries that are easy to use throughout the week. Also, I recommend not wasting any food ever. So that means if you're using broccoli, shave the stalks, throw them into your chili. You won't taste them if they're small enough. Just use everything you have. My favorite tip is bringing measuring cups when you go to the grocery store and only purchasing what you need. So if there's bulk bins at the grocery store in which you shop, bring a bulk bin and bring a measuring cup, and hopefully you will have already planned your weeks for the meal. Your meals for the week. Your meals for the week, and you can purchase only what you need. If you're concerned about missing your cultural foods, which is a big concern for many people who are going vegan, there are so many books written that address specifically your needs. There are like 1,000 vegan cookbooks or even more. So these are 4 that I highly recommend. Miyoko's Japanese Cooking, Terry Romero's Viva Vegan. Terry Romero also wrote many cookbooks with Isa Chandra Maskowitz, who's a fantastic chef. And then Bryant Terry, Afro Vegan, and Chloe Coscarelli's Vegan Italian Kitchen. Chloe Coscarelli is known for winning cupcake wars with vegan cupcakes. This is something I recommend for people who are really busy, and that's, in this picture, I've put salads. So you just grab your salad and then bring a dressing to work, and you have those ready for you. But also, in the back, you can see that I've put smoothie fixings together. So all you have to do is throw them in the blender in the morning and you're good to go. So in this one, I think I can see apples and carrots and ginger, and then in the other one, bananas and oatmeal and kale. And all you have to do is just throw those in and put in your non-dairy milk. What started as a mission to get my family to eat healthier and live longer became my life mission to help everybody eat healthier and live longer on whatever budget they're on. Little would make me happier for you to benefit from plant-based on a budget. Please go to the website, check out the meal plans, and spread the word to everyone you know who you feel could benefit, no matter how messed up their chakras are. You can change your life with the change in your pocket by eating plant-based on a budget. And if you have any questions, I'm very easy to be reached. Feel free to contact me whenever with whatever questions you may have. Thank you.